Hi class, I'm really excited today. We get to start Homer and his Iliad. If you haven't read this before, it's really amazing. Like, I hope you like it. Just so you know, we're not reading the entire thing. I'm just giving you the highlights. We'll focus on the entirety of the Odyssey, which has a little bit of a wider appeal in some ways, but we can talk about that. But yes, so Homer's Iliad, that's what this lecture is about. Here are my goals for today. Excuse me. First, I'd like to briefly introduce Homer's Greece and the form of his writing. Then we'll do some overview of the central conflicts of the Iliad to get you started for reading the excerpts of the first half of it. So specifically, we'll talk about the conflict between these two great Achaean fighters, Achilles and Agamemnon. These two are on the same side of the war, but they have a very heated conflict between themselves. There's this idea that they should be able to designate who the best of the Achaeans is, and the best of the Achaeans seems to be either Achilles or Agamemnon. I'm largely thinking broadly in this talk about this question: why is Achilles so angry in the epic? He's kind of our main character. What makes him so mad? And the conflict specifically has to do with his fate in the epic. And then we'll kind of end with this sort of question here: who or what causes the Trojan War? There are many different ways to answer that, even though there tends to be one primary answer, but we'll kind of poke holes or put pressure on that conclusion about what caused the Trojan War. Okay, so let's get started. So briefly, I would like to introduce Homer and the Iliad. So the Iliad itself, and Homer's writing as well, was written in the 8th century BC, so during what we refer to now as the Iron Age. And it was written about the 12th century BC, the Bronze Age. So this is something that you should keep in mind kind of throughout your reading, that this is a text written in the past about an even further past event. So that's kind of interesting, potentially. Just so you know, Iron Age and Bronze Age, these don't refer to the ages of man myth that we talked about with Hesiod. These are like literal designations that historians and anthropologists use to discuss early histories of human civilization in real life, not just in myth. So if you have questions about that, it's worth asking, because it is kind of confusing. This text is about mythological beings, but it also has connections to like an actual historical period, that is the Bronze Age and the Iron Age too. The Iliad itself is the story of the Trojan War, and many people have speculated that this mythological story of the fall of this great city, Troy, might be a fictionalization of a real event. In the 12th century BC, the Bronze Age, basically all of the civilizations that encapsulated what we would refer to as the Bronze Age, it had this widespread collapse. Like, all these great civilizations that were burgeoning and developing writing, developing trade routes, all this great civilization stuff. For some reason, in the 1200s BC, all of those civilizations fell. People died, people scattered, the great kind of urban centers basically collapsed, and people started to relate to each other in different ways. And so this is referred to as this prehistorical kind of moment, the Bronze Age collapse. And what's interesting about it is, you can look this up, there's no one really knows exactly why this happened. Why all of these major civilizations that were just starting to kind of get going and succeeding, in their development, why did they all collapse at the same time? It's kind of a mystery. People have offered hypotheses. So, like, one of the hypotheses is that it might have been like invading forces from abroad. A lot of the Bronze Age civilizations conducted warfare on land, with horses and carriages and this sort of thing. And so perhaps the invading armies were more like pirates, or like what we might refer to today as like guerrilla warfare, like a different kind of warfare tactics that the Bronze Age civilizations were not able to deal with. Anyway, other people think it might have been like a natural disaster or something like that, like a big volcano eruption or I don't know, something. But yeah, people really don't know why all these great civilizations collapsed at the same time. So maybe we'll learn in the future what happened, but for right now, we don't know for sure. But the Iliad is a fictionalization of this great war that brought down a thriving city, Troy. And so people think that the Iliad might be related to the real Bronze Age collapse. Another thing about Homer and his Iliad and Odyssey is they were composed, this is scholars formulate this theory, they were composed in a way that is referred to as oral formulaic theory. So the idea is, so this was an orally composed poem, something that was not originally written down first. It was spoken and performed orally, and it was done so through these formulas. So poets or performers would memorize parts of the poem and little conventional phrases that they could deploy throughout. And so in one way the performers had really great memories because they were able to memorize this vast amount of text. But in another way, some of the text is a little repetitive. You'll find as you start reading it, often the battle scenes kind of start to seem like each other. You'll see this more in the Odyssey as well, since you'll be reading the entire text, but there are a lot of moments of repetition. And it's largely because these original texts were not, they're not written down, they were orally performed. So, reliant on these people's memories. Okay. But that's something to keep in mind, just the fact that, as you read, in fact, you might read it aloud, because that's really what the poem was intended, how it was intended to be consumed. So, orally. The poems are also formulated in this particular meter in Greek, dactylic hexameter. So it's like six trochees or something like that. If you get really into poetry, you should look into this. But partly it's not that important for you to think about, because dactylic hexameter is really hard to render in English. Like the closest we have in English is iambic pentameter. For those of you who have studied Shakespeare, that might be familiar. But anyway, there is a particular rhythm to these lines. So like as you read the epic, you'll note that the lines don't continue to the end of the page margins. They stop and begin again in a new line. And that is the poet in English is trying to approximate the original poetry in Greek. So just to know that there is a meter to this, and that would help with the performer to memorize as well. And then this is another thing to keep in mind. Homer is also sort of mysterious as a figure. People debate whether he was actually a living person, a single human man, or if perhaps something else was going on. That it is possible that the Homeric poems were linked to like a tradition of poetry, sort of in the way that people will argue this about Confucius now too, that like maybe he wasn't a real like individual man, but like a group of people who all did the same sort of poetry and they all worked together. And if you think about it, the way in which this poem is formulated through this oral formulaic theory, it kind of makes sense that it would be like a group of performers who were all trained together to do this type of composition and this type of performance. And so, anyway, when I refer to Homer, I'm sort of being a little bit loose. We don't really know if he existed or not. But there is, on the other hand, there is evidence that there was likely some individual at some point in the 8th century when this stuff was written down. There was probably one individual person who composed both the Iliad and the Odyssey, because they have some structural similarities and some resonance with each other, that it makes sense that a single composer at some point wrote these things down for perpetuity and all that. Okay, that's about enough. If you have more questions about this, let me know in class, but I'd like to get into the content. So here's briefly to introduce some more. Okay, I think I already told you that. Okay, so So the plot and the form of the Iliad. So we're kind of talking about a conflict. So the Iliad, again, is the story of the fall of Ilium, Ilium. Ilium is another word for Troy. So the Iliad is a story of the fall of this city and civilization, Troy, and the sort of heroic men and women who lived there. And so we're thinking about this region here. This is Greece, modern day Greece now, and then this is modern day Turkey over here. Very ancient part of the world. These are all, the map is, it includes all these Greek names of the places. But anyway, here's some kind of like briefly overview ideas. So about the Trojan War. So in the myth of the Trojan War, it was a 10-year conflict. So again, we're not really sure if the Trojan War ever really existed, something called the Trojan War, but we do know that there was this huge collapse of the Bronze Age civilizations. And we also know that Homer wrote this stuff down and seemed to remember something, at least the tradition of the collapse of these great people of the past. So anyway, so in the myth at least, the Trojan War took 10 years. It's a very long war. It's a war between the Achaeans. The Achaeans are like a rough what's the word? Conglomeration, is that right? A rough combination of various Greek city-states. So there's like kings from all around the Greek region here, the region of Greece, that kind of roughly together join up with similar interests. But you'll notice as you read that there's a lot of fighting in between the Achaeans. But it's the Achaeans, so roughly this half of what constitutes ancient Greece, and then this half, which also, these guys are also Greek, which is kind of confusing, but we're referring to them as the Trojans to differentiate them. So just so you know, like, the Trojan War is between people who are very similar to one another. They have the same religion, the same values, and all that stuff, but one is this very unified city with one king, that is the city of Troy, and then these kind of like less unified groups of kings over here on the Achaean side. Okay, the Trojan War is often, if you know anything about it at all, people tend to remember this part, that the war was caused by Helen of Troy. So her name is Helen of Troy. You think that she would be from here, but actually Helen starts off married to an Achaean. She's married to Menelaus, who's the king of Sparta, which I don't know if I see. Here's Athens. Where's Sparta? Somewhere down around here. I think it's close to Sparta, or Athens, that is. Anyway, wherever Sparta is. Let's see it. Maybe it's not on this map. But anyway, so she used to be the queen of Sparta. A Trojan prince named Paris comes to visit. They fall in love, or perhaps he abducts her, but whatever the reason, she goes with Paris back to Troy. So it's this story of adultery, and the adultery that basically caused this conflict between these people. So the Trojan War is the attempt of the Achaeans to gather together, go to Troy to bring back Helen, and to punish the Trojans for this affront, stealing this woman from Menelaus. Helen of Troy is also known as the most beautiful woman in the world. She's, super gorgeous, apparently. Okay, so the Iliad also takes place over the last few weeks in the conflict. So even though this is a 10-year conflict in the myth, Homer's Iliad begins in a particular way. Homer plops us into the middle of things, in medias res. This is a Latin phrase, so in things, in the middle of things. Homer plops us into, basically he plops us into the 9th year of the conflict, when everyone is really, really tired of fighting. And this is a strategy of Homer's to make things really interesting. Like, he doesn't start off at the beginning. He starts off relatively close to the end of the war, so that we get a feeling for like how tired these men are from fighting. Okay, let's keep going. So, one thing also to note about the form of this epic, I invite you to read it aloud, because that's how it was meant to be read. It's also quite complicated, these sentences. Homer is famous for this particular poetic form, the simile. For those of you who have studied English before, or other languages too, employ similes. A simile in English uses like or as words that are comparative. So like or as are used to connect two things that really don't have a lot in common, but through the simile they are brought together and the reader is invited to think about the two things together. To think about what they do have in common and then also maybe potentially what they don't have in common. But it's just a way to kind of heighten the meaningfulness of literature. So Homer is famous for these similes, and here's one to kind of get us started thinking about Homer's writing. So this is from a moment deep in the action of the epic. This will be in the latter half of your reading, so next time. But it's a battle scene. Okay, so Patroclus, he's a warrior on the Achaean side. He's best friends with Achilles. But here, I'll read this aloud. Patroclus, rising beside him, stabbed his right jawbone, ramming the spearhead square between his teeth so hard, he hooked him by that spearhead over the chariot rail, hoisted, dragged the Trojan out, as an angler perched on a jutting rock ledge drags some fish from the sea, some noble catch with line and glittering bronze hook. So with the spear, Patroclus gaffed him off his car, his mouth gaping round the glittering point, and flipped him down face first, dead as he fell, his life breath blown away. So this is two sentences, but they're so intense with what's going on. But we have this image conjured of Patroclus and some Trojan warrior. So Patroclus rising beside this Trojan warrior and stabbing him through the jawbone into his teeth and hooking him, hoisting him out of the chariot as if Patroclus is an angler or fisherman perched on a rock ledge dragging a fish out of the sea. So the simile is comparing Patroclus to an angler or fisherman and the Trojan to a fish. The spear is like a fishing rod or something, and everything. So anyway, you get a feel for that. It's pretty exciting. Okay, so things to note about this simile. First, this is really exciting. Like, I don't know if anyone has ever gone fishing. I mean, I'm not the biggest fisherman or anything, but if you can think about like some sport that you really enjoy, like you really like watching it and seeing this thing or hearing this described, I hope you can feel the excitement of this, like Patroclus rising and then stabbing this dude between his teeth and then hooking him over the spear and he falls off and then his mouth is gaping. You know, it's pretty amazing. This it's epic. You know, this is where we get that kind of like descriptive word, epic. This is exciting. War is super exciting. You know, it's kind of like men behaving. You know, this is why people watch Marvel movies. You know. It's very exciting. But on the other hand, the simile really brings to our attention how purposeless and also kind of I don't know, it really makes me sad. This is horrible. A man is being killed as if he were like a fish. You know, stabbed through the mouth and pulled out of his chariot so that he's flipped down face first in the dust, and his mouth is gaping around the point of the spear. I mean, this is kind of grotesque, actually, you know, like a human body being treated this way. And so the simile can kind of do these things, you know, at the same time. It can kind of make us excited, make us kind of like feel sick, kind of feel like this is really, I don't know, what's the point of all this? And then one other thing that you might keep in mind is, if you think about the content of this simile, like Patroclus stabbing this man in the jaw, we might be able to picture it, you know, if we've seen movies about this period of time in history, or if like you've played video games and you've seen this kind of action thing, you know, depicted on screen. But if you think about it from Homer's perspective as an 8th century person writing about the past, he likely hadn't seen this kind of warfare, the kind of warfare where there's a chariot and some dude getting stabbed in the mouth, you know. But we can probably know that he did see fishermen, you know, like he's living in a more rural time than the time he's writing about. So it's kind of interesting that the similes he uses, they tend to be likening this epic battle from the past to something that's much more mundane and like everyday. that would probably be more like what Homer was used to growing up in the Iron Age, when things were less developed. So often these similes use scenes from nature, fishing, farming, kind of, hanging out in nature, basically. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind, that like Homer, when he's writing about this time 400 years in the past, he's doing it with this kind of like awe for what people in the past were capable of relative to the time that he's living in, when things aren't as nice or not as glorious. So you might keep that in mind as you're reading as well. Okay, so here's this is just a breakdown of the conflict. There's so many names in this, so just like everything we're reading about, Greek people, try not to get too bogged down. Hopefully this will be, helpful enough. But so just to remind you again, we have the side of the Achaeans. They're also called the Danaans sometimes, and sometimes they're called the Argives. These are all roughly synonymous with sort of like the people of the Greek mainland. So this side, the Achaeans versus the Trojans. The Trojans are all much more unified around Troy, of course. So the important characters on the Achaean side are the sons of Atreus, called the Atreides. Sometimes they're referred to like that. It just means sons of Atreus. So that's their dad's name. We'll learn more about this house of Atreus in the future when we read Agamemnon, the play. But so we have these two brothers, Agamemnon and Menelaus. So these are basically the most powerful kings present. Agamemnon is the most powerful king. He is championed by the goddess Hera. She really likes him. They have a lot in common, too. They're kind of petty and powerful. Menelaus and Helen, of course, like his is the wife who was stolen or who left him for the Trojan Paris. Okay, we also have the Myrmidons. This is a group of soldiers they're hard to control. They're led by Achilles, who's basically our main character of this text. Achilles is also championed by Hera. Hera really likes Achilles. Hera loves the Achaean side. She really wants Troy to fall. He's championed by Hera, so Hera's kind of got conflicting loyalties here. Thetis is Achilles' mother, so of course she is on his side. By the way, these in brackets are the gods who are on the side of the humans. Everyone else is human here. If they're in brackets, they're a god. And if they're in parentheses, I think it's just Helen. Anyway, okay, another Myrmidon is Patroclus. Patroclus is Achilles' best friend. You might think of them kind of like you thought of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Very devoted to one another, kind of an intimate friendship here between men. Odysseus is an important Achaean. He's championed by the goddess Athena. We'll learn much more about him in the Odyssey. Ajax is also important. He's a really great fighter. He's almost as good as Achilles, but not quite. Nestor is another important guy, but don't worry too much about these guys down here. The main important guys are Agamemnon, Menelaus, Achilles, and Patroclus. Okay, and then on the Trojan side, we have the king of Troy, King Priam. People sometimes say Priam. I might say either one. I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, but Priam. He's very old, very wise, very beloved. His wife Hecuba. They have 50 children. I think Priam has 50 sons. I'm not sure if they're all with Hecuba, but it doesn't matter. But anyway, his most powerful son, his most heroic son is Hector. Hector is a family man. He's married to a beautiful woman named Andromache. They have a son together, Astyanax, who's like the heir to the throne. It seems like Hector would probably be the next king in line if he survives, which, spoiler alert, he doesn't. Another of Priam's sons is Paris. Priam has 50 sons, though. There's a whole bunch. But anyway, Hector and Paris are the kind of main sons to keep in mind. Paris is the guy who steals Helen, or who abducts Helen, or seduces her. Aphrodite likes both of these guys a lot. You'll note that the gods like the humans who are most like them. So Athena likes Odysseus because they're both crafty and good at strategy. Hera likes Agamemnon and Achilles because they're both the best. And she likes Agamemnon because he's kind of petty and into hierarchy and stuff. Aphrodite likes Helen and Paris because they're beautiful and they prioritize love over everything else. Another important Trojan is Sarpedon. He's mainly important because he's the son of Zeus. So he's a mortal man, son of Zeus. Zeus is I kind of put him over here on the Trojan side. Zeus has a lot of loyalties with the Trojan side. He's got a son over here. He really loves Troy. He doesn't want it to fall. But Zeus is also kind of tied to the Achaean side as well. He loves Achilles. He loves Agamemnon. He's really torn about this conflict. Thetis is also sort of torn. She wants to honor her son Achilles, but she also hates Agamemnon, so it's lots of conflicting loyalties going on. Okay. All right, so I mentioned this, the rage of Achilles. This is a really important concept. In fact, you might even view the entire epic as organized around Achilles' rage. Like what brings it about and what finally quells this rage, like what allows him to finally move on and move past this amount of anger that he has. So Achilles, again, is our main character, and his rage is super important. In fact, our translator of this edition makes it the first word of his translation, rage. It's also, what it's translated from is also the first word of the Iliad itself. So what Fagles is translating here is the Greek word melis. So what melis means is it's rage, but it's a particular kind of rage. It's not just like, I'm so mad, this person, cut me off in traffic or whatever. Or this person, I don't know what you're mad at. But anyway, it's like a very intense kind of rage. Sometimes, I feel this myself sometimes. But anyway, the definition is it's the kind of rage that should be only felt by the gods, the rage of the gods. Like it's like a divine rage. You might think of it as something like, if you see waves crashing during a storm, that's the kind of rage that Melis refers to, the rage of the seas, or like the earth quaking, or a volcano erupting, the kind of rage that is cosmic and, otherworldly almost, or just sort of divine. It's important that Achilles has this rage because he is a mortal man. He shouldn't be this angry, and yet he has the kind of rage that a human being ought not to have. So this begs the question, like, what is making him so mad? Like, how can a human be as mad as the gods? So we're going to learn why. So the Iliad begins with his rage. Literally, it begins with Melis. The Iliad will end when Achilles finally lets go of this kind of anger. So as you read, try to chart Achilles' rage. What is making him mad and when? And then see the implications of his rage. He makes particular choices based off of how emotional he is feeling. There's vast implications to his emotional state. And as you read, see who his anger is actually harming. He brings about a lot of harm to a lot of people, but he also brings a lot of harm to himself. So we'll talk about that. Okay, so here are the first lines of the poem. Okay, rage. Goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, murderous, doomed, that cost the Achaeans countless losses, hurling down to the house of death so many sturdy souls, great fighter souls, but made their bodies carrion, feast for the dogs and birds. And the will of Zeus was moving towards its end. Begin muse, when the two first broke and clashed, Agamemnon, lord of men, and brilliant Achilles. Okay, this is our opener. This is our invocation to the muses. So similar to Hesiod, except for way shorter, only 8 lines here. Rage, goddess, sing the rage of Achilles, of Peleus' son Achilles. So goddess, sing the rage. So Homer is invoking the muse to sing of Achilles' rage through him. And then we sort of learn the occasion of the poem, that this is the rage that cost the death of so many fellow Greek soldiers among him. And then also he tells us that he wants to begin when the will of Zeus was moving towards its end. So we're going to begin near the end of the conflict of the Trojan War. And then Homer chooses to begin the muse, to begin when the two first broke and clashed. Which two? Agamemnon and brilliant Achilles. So this is kind of interesting. If you were going to tell the story of the Trojan War, you might do it as I just told you a couple slides ago, that it's like the conflict between Troy and these Achaeans. It's over Helen. That's probably the most straightforward way to start this story. But that's not where Homer starts. Homer starts with the conflict between Agamemnon and Achilles, the two guys who are on the same side of the conflict, of the Trojan War. But even though they're on the same side, they're fighting, they should be supporting one another. They actually kind of hate each other. And so that's where we're going to begin, when these two Achaean soldiers are like at odds with one another. So why is Achilles so angry? This is kind of confusing, so I'm going to walk you through it. Okay, so think about this. We're in the 9th year of a 10-year war. People are really tired of this. They've been away from home, for 9 years now. This means that they're camping. Like, they're camping on the shores of Troy, trying to survive, this conflict. Tensions are really high. People are like hungry, horny, sad, resentful. They want to go home. Okay, and so this is what happens. Agamemnon takes Chryseis, who is a Trojan temple princess, daughter of Chryses, a priest of Apollo, as a war prize. Okay, so the Achaeans mount some sort of attack on the Trojans. They capture these Trojan priests and priestesses at a temple of Apollo. Remember, Apollo is Troy and Apollo have a lot of connections. Like, they really like Apollo over in Troy. So anyway, the Achaeans take this territory that includes this temple of Apollo, and there's a temple priestess there named Chryseis. Agamemnon abducts her, takes her as his war prize. That word is kind of there's a lot going on there. War prize. Basically, this is how Greeks treat their captors. They either kill them, usually. They usually kill a lot of the men and young boys, sons. Usually with women, they take them as either slaves or like sexual slaves. So this war prize thing, basically what it means is Agamemnon takes this young girl to be his, girlfriend is not really the right word. Sex slave is probably more accurate. Okay, so Agamemnon takes this woman. Chryseis, her father, prays to Apollo for help. So he's a priest of Apollo, she's a priestess. They're like, hey, Apollo, this is not right, help us. So Apollo sends this plague on the Achaeans. They find out eventually that the plague will continue until Chryseis is returned. So Agamemnon agrees to return this young girl, but then he's mad that he doesn't have a war prize anymore. So he takes Briseis, who is the war prize of Achilles, so another young woman. So basically, Agamemnon and Achilles are fighting over these war prizes, these kind of like women who they have taken as slaves. So Achilles, because he is not as powerful politically as Agamemnon, he must comply. He sort of like doesn't want to give up Briseis, but he eventually does because he doesn't want to, cause even more conflict. But he's super bitter, and because of this, he decides not to fight anymore in the war. Okay, so it's kind of confusing, but here are his lines talking about it. I might not read this whole thing, but this is Achilles talking about Agamemnon. He calling him shameless, armored in shamelessness, always shrewd with greed. How could any Argive soldier obey your orders? Not I, no. It wasn't Trojan spearmen who brought me here to fight. The Trojans never did me damage, not in the least. They never stole my cattle or my horses, never. In Phthia, where the rich soil breeds strong men, did they waste my crops. So Achilles is saying here that I actually don't really have any problem with the Trojans. They never did anything wrong with me. They never did anything bad to me. They never brought me damage. How could they? Look at the endless miles between us. And so he's like, I'm not mad at the Trojans. No, I'm mad at you. You colossal, shameless Agamemnon. We all followed you to please you, to fight for you, to win your honor back from the Trojans. Menelaus and you dog face. So think of this. This is a soldier basically telling his commander that he's calling him these insulting names and calling him greedy and kind of horrible. What do you care? Nothing. You don't look right or left. And now you threaten to strip me of my prize in person, the one I fought for long and hard. The sons of Achaea handed her to me. So you're going to steal Briseis from me. My honor never equaled yours. Whenever we sack some wealthy Trojan stronghold, my arms bear the brunt of the raw, savage fighting, true, but when it comes to dividing up the plunder, the lion's share is yours, and back I go to my ships, clutching some scraps, some pittance that I love, when I have fought to exhaustion. And so this is true here too. Achilles is the best fighter on the Achaean side. Agamemnon isn't really a good fighter. So Agamemnon depends on Achilles' labor and sacrifice in order to win these wars, and yet Agamemnon is keeping all of the good prizes for himself and even stealing the things that it should be Achilles. So here Achilles says, no more now, back I go to Phthia, that's his hometown. Better that way by far, the journey home in the beaked ships of war. I have no mind to linger here disgraced, brimming your cup and piling up your plunder. So basically, he's going on strike. You know, he's like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm tired of this. What's interesting is this is what he decides. He's so upset and insulted by Agamemnon's behavior to him that Achilles goes back to his Myrmidon shelters and ships. Odysseus and Ajax try to follow him there to persuade him to come back to battle. But when they see him, they see Achilles by the ships, delighting his heart now, plucking strong and clear on the fine lyre, beautifully carved. Achilles was lifting his spirits with it now, singing the famous deeds of fighting heroes. So we get a feeling for Achilles here, like he is sort of the exploited worker, you know, whose employer is not treating him well. So he decides to withhold his labor so that his employer will suffer, basically. What he'd rather be doing is singing songs accompanied by a guitar, singing songs about the famous deeds of fighting heroes. So it's kind of interesting that Achilles would rather be like a folk singer or something like that, or like, you know, he'd rather be a poet singing about famous heroes. He'd rather not be the famous hero that he is. He'd rather sing about them. And so actually, this conflict at the beginning of book 1, we see Achilles decide not to fight anymore, and he doesn't fight until, I think it's book 19 or something. He finally decides to get back into the conflict. I think that's actually book 16 is when he decides to get back into the conflict. So that's pretty interesting. Like, you're not reading the entire book the entire epic. If you were reading book after book after book where so many people are dying and Achilles, the best fighter, is sitting out, would really strike you. So you're not really getting the full force of all that, but just kind of picture it, that like Achilles is sitting around while everyone else is dying, knowing that he has the means within him as the best fighter to win the war. But instead, he's so angry that he's going to sit out. Okay, so this is the sort of thing that the Achaeans are fighting over, specifically Agamemnon and Achilles. And so, who is the best of the Achaeans? This is a line in book 1. That both of them are trying to like jockey for position as the best of the Achaean men, best hero. So, in some ways, Agamemnon might be considered the best of the Achaeans. He has lines like this: Zeus is a harsh, cruel god. He vowed to me long ago, he bowed his head that I should never embark for home till I had brought the walls of Ilium crashing down. Whoa, this is amazing. Agamemnon seems to have a direct connection to Zeus. Zeus made a vow to Agamemnon long ago that I, Agamemnon, will bring the walls of Ilium crashing down. Pretty exciting. You know, not everyone has a direct kind of relationship with Zeus in that way, so Agamemnon does have one. Seems good. He's got this kind of prophecy to bring down Troy. On the other hand, maybe you think Achilles is the best of the Achaeans. He is the best soldier. Where Agamemnon is like the most powerful king, he's probably the richest, the most politically powerful person. Achilles he's the reason why they would win the war anyway. He is the best soldier. Here's Achilles talking about his labors as a soldier. Note the weird simile here, the strange epic simile. Okay, he's talking about himself. Like a mother bird hurrying morsels back to her wingless young ones, whatever she can catch, but it's all starvation wages for herself, so for me. Many a sleepless night I've bivouacked in harness, day after bloody day I've hacked my passage through, fighting other soldiers to win their wives as prizes. 12 cities of men I've stormed and sacked from shipboard, 11 I claimed by land on the fertile earth of Troy. And from all I dragged off piles of splendid plunder, hauled it away, and always gave the lot to Agamemnon. That son of Atreus, always skulking behind the lines, safe in his fast ships, and he would take it all. So we get a feeling for like Achilles views himself as like this mother bird helping her her defenseless, wingless young babies. That's how he views his like status as a soldier. You know, he's like helping his children, when actually he's a soldier helping other soldiers, and specifically helping Agamemnon. Agamemnon, who is safe behind the lines of battle in a ship. So yeah, you can probably imagine if you've ever had a job and you hated your boss, this is sort of the ideas here that Achilles is giving voice to. What's interesting is, and this is all comes from book 9. This is a really important book in the epic. Book meaning like something like chapter. In book 9, we get Achilles at his most philosophical. Achilles, who, according to the myth, is just this sort of killing machine. He's like the best soldier ever. Like, he's amazing. Everyone is just like, yeah, there's no one better than this soldier, Achilles. But Homer makes his character much more complex by giving him these very, I don't know, for me at least, I find them very compelling ideas about like the nature of life and the nature of war. And so Achilles is given all these kind of philosophical ideas to think through in Book 9. So it's called the Embassy to Achilles. This is midway through the conflict, midway through the epic too, when the Achaeans are really losing. When Achilles decides not to fight anymore, he brings about the tide of battle really turns against the Achaeans. They need him to fight, otherwise they will lose. So there's an embassy of people, a group of Achaeans gather together, and they're like, we really need to get Achilles back on our side. We need to make, I don't know, we need to, Agamemnon, you need to apologize, and we need to kind of like beg Achilles basically to get back into the conflict. Otherwise we will lose. So this is when Odysseus and Nestor and I think others, Ajax, they go to Achilles to try to convince him to get back in the conflict. Okay, so Achilles has these lines. Will Agamemnon win me over? Not for all the world, I swear it, nor will the rest of the Achaeans. No, what lasting thanks in the long run for warring with our enemies on and on no end. One and the same lot for the man who hangs back and the man who battles hard. The same honor waits for the coward and the brave. They both go down to death, the fighter who shirks, the one who works to exhaustion. And what's laid up for me? What pittance? Nothing. And after suffering hardships year in, year out, staking my life on the mortal risks of war. So, here Achilles is thinking about what they're offering him. You know, Agamemnon is apologizing. He's going to give him gifts and stuff and all this, whatever. And Achilles, you know, this is what he seemed to want. He wanted more respect from Agamemnon. In Book 9, he's offered that, but he still rejects it. So why doesn't he want to fight? And the reason why is he gives these sort of reasons here. What lasting thanks in the long run for warring with our enemies on and on no end? What good is it to keep fighting with our enemies when there doesn't seem to be an end in sight? He goes further, one and the same lot for the man who hangs back and the man who battles hard. So this is the same word we saw in Gilgamesh translation. The same lot for the fool as the king, I guess. Oh, no, actually, it was like, look at your lot at Gilgamesh. Yeah, you were given a throne and told to... did you ever compare your lot with a fool? I think that's the line. Achilles has a similar sort of idea here. It's... well, it's not really the same, I guess, but he comes up with the same language. He's thinking about lots, thinking about fate for men. He says it's one and the same fate for the man who battles and the man who hangs back. The same honor waits for the coward and the brave. He's basically saying it doesn't matter if he's brave or if he's a coward, he's going to die either way. This is really remarkable to come from the lips of the hero who's supposed to be the best fighter. So no matter if I'm a coward or if I'm brave, I'll still go down to death. What's laid up for me if I die? There's nothing. Yeah. He has this very nihilistic argument about, you know, what is this all for? Like, why am I fighting anyway? I don't really hate the Trojans, etc. Okay. There's a lot more to this argument, so as you're reading Book 9, kind of think about if you're swayed by any of his arguments as to why he doesn't want to fight. When he's referring to his fate here, the same lot for the man who hangs back, the man who battles hard, Achilles has a particularly interesting fate in the epic. He is a really compelling character. In a lot of ways, you might think of him as similar to Gilgamesh. You know, Gilgamesh being 2/3 God, 1/3 man, and he has to kind of come to accept the fact that he is mortal when he might have supposed that he was actually immortal, but no, he's not. So Achilles is a similar sort of hero. You know, he kind of unites these questions about mortality and immortality and divine and human. I have this image here of, this is just a pictorial image of the myth. So here's Zeus, Father Zeus, sitting on high. This figure here, this lady in supplication, kneeling before Zeus, begging him to listen to her. This is Thetis, who is Achilles' mother. So we learn in book 1 when Achilles talks to his mother, asks his mother for help. Thetis is an immortal goddess, by the way. So he asks her for help from Zeus. She's like, hey mom, can you please help me out? Thetis gets the idea that she'll go to Zeus and ask Zeus to give more honor to her son. Okay, so here Thetis is asking Zeus for that honor. Zeus, Father Zeus, if ever I served you well among the deathless gods with a word or action, bring this prayer to pass. Honor my son Achilles, doomed to the shortest life of any man on earth. So this is, we sort of learned this, that apparently Achilles is doomed to have a short life. Okay, interesting. Well, here's how Achilles talks about his fate. He talks about him having the choice between two fates. Mother, so meaning Thetis tells me, mother tells me, the immortal goddess Thetis with her glistening feet, that two fates bear me on to the day of death. If I hold out here and lay siege to Troy, my journey home is gone, but my glory never dies. If I voyage back to the fatherland I love, my pride, my glory dies. True, but the life that's left me will be long. The stroke of death will not come on me quickly. Okay, so this is kind of interesting here. Most humans only have one fate. It's what they're fated to do. You might not know what your fate is, but you only have one. Achilles is unique in that he has two fates and he can choose which one he wants. So he knows what will happen to him, and he just gets to choose. That's his sort of central conflict in the epic. So one of the fates is, of course he's going to die, like Gilgamesh comes to know that Achilles knows he's going to die, and so he gets a choice about how he will die. So he can choose to stay at Troy and fight in the battle, but if he does that, then he will never be able to go back home again. So he can lay siege to Troy and have this glorious death in battle. And his glory, even though his human life will die, his glory in battle will never die. And he'll never go home again, but he will have this great name for himself as a soldier. So that's one choice, the if here, and then the other choice is this if. If I voyage back home, my pride, my glory dies, but the life that's left me will be long. So he'll have a long life if he goes home, but he won't have the kind of glory that he would have if he stayed in Troy to fight. So it's sort of like between, fame and maybe shame, or just like not being known. It probably would be really bad if you had the potential to be such a great soldier and you chose not to. People might feel, might feel that you were wasting something. But on the other hand, choosing a long life that's a really tempting thing. So anyway, this is his choice between these two different fates. And one way to kind of help us think about them is he's basically choosing between two types of glory in the Greek universe. So like ancient Greek values, they really, really value glory, kind of over and above like other values that most societies have. Greeks love glory, and they have different types of glory, and here are the two that really animate the Iliad. So one type of glory is called the Greek word kleos, and this translates to something like glory or fame in battle. So these like epic heroes and in war, and the kind of glory that you can amass if you're a great soldier, you're good at killing people, you're good at taking treasures and conquering people. So then you might have kleos. So when Achilles is talking about his two fates, he talks about that he wishes he had. He specifically references glory that never dies. So he can choose to have this glory that never dies in the Fagles translation. In the Greek, the term is aptheton kleos, which translates to unwithering glory. So glory that will never wither away. It never dies. It never gets old. It's always going to be glorious forever. This is kind of a fun pun on Homer's part. This word aptheton, which translates to unwithering, it has this PH-TH root that is the same root as Achilles' hometown of Pythia. So it's kind of interesting that Achilles is from this place that means the withering place. Okay, so anyway, Achilles could have this unwithering glory if he chooses to stay in battle. Or he might choose to go home. For Greeks, I'm not sure exactly if he would have Nostos especially, but the Greeks, they like glory in battle. They also love glorious homecoming stories. So what Nostos means, you might know some of the root of Nostos is the same root as words in English like nostalgia. You know that word? Nost means home. So Nostos is sort of the glory of home and the homestead and the family. We'll learn a lot more about Nostos when we read the Odyssey, because that's a Nostos poem. It's a poem all about this value of Nostos. The Iliad is more of a Kleos poem. It's about the glory in battle. So anyway, one thing to note is that not all Greek heroes are granted a Nostos, like a glorious homecoming. They usually don't know if they're going to receive one either. We'll learn more about various Nostoses in the Odyssey. So Agamemnon has a failed one. Agamemnon is able to have glory in the Trojan War, but when he tries to go home, he does not have a great time of it. We learn about his fate in the Oresteia. We'll learn about Odysseus' journey home and how hard it was for him in the Odyssey. So anyway, Achilles' choice you could maybe see it as a choice between glory in battle or glorious homecoming. Again, I'm not sure exactly if he would have a glorious homecoming. You know, usually you have a glorious homecoming when you also achieve glory in battle. But yeah, anyway. But he is largely choosing between fame in battle or going home. And so that's his choice, Achilles. Achilles is unique in having the knowledge of his fate. Like, not everyone has that. You never know if you're going to have glory in battle. You only try your best, and maybe you'll die, maybe you won't. You never know if you're going to be able to get home after war. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Achilles he's conscious of his fate in this way, in a way that is unique among other humans. So we might compare him to Hector in that respect. Hector is the best soldier on the Trojan side. He's sort of the counterpart to Achilles in that way. We learn a lot about what Hector is fighting for in Book 6 of the Iliad. So I'm called this slide, I guess, Hector's Nostos, so his sort of glorious homecoming. He's given like a little bit of one, but it's not real, it's not lasting either. But we learn about Troy, Andromache, and Astyanax. So Hector is also like Achilles. He's fighting for both Kleos and Nostos, but for him, these two values are bound up together. Where Achilles could maybe choose between them, Hector has no choice. If he doesn't win the battle, his home will be destroyed. So he's got to fight for both, really. So Book 6, he returns to Troy. We learn what he is fighting for, and by extension, we learn what we'll lose when Troy falls. In Book 6, it's actually really a lovely book. I hope you enjoy reading it. It's beautiful, like, the sort of glorious civilization that will fall with Troy. So we meet Paris and Helen. They're also mentioned in Book 6 if you read the larger text. There's a really funny part of Book 6 where Paris tries to fight Helen's ex-husband Menelaus. He gets too scared and Aphrodite has to save him. It's really funny. Anyway, we meet Paris and Helen. There's a really interesting moment with Helen. We meet Priam and Hecuba, so Hector's father and mother. We see Troy, this glorious walled city. It's very like bustling city with lots of people, and it is very civilized and all that. And then we get to meet Hector's family. Okay, so this is such a poignant part of the text. Homer's really pulling at our heartstrings here. Hector, in Book 6, he goes from the battle to try to find his wife. He needs to talk to his wife. He wants to see her. He misses her, etc. Okay. He learns that, so he tries to find her at their house, but she's not there. So once he learns that she's not there, that's where we begin here. So at that, Hector spun and rushed from his house, backed by the same way down the wide, well-paved streets throughout the city until he reached the Scaean gates, the last point he would pass to gain the field of battle. So these are the gates that surround the walled city of Troy. There, his warm, generous wife came running up to meet him, Andromache, the daughter of gallant-hearted Aetion, who lived below Mount Plecos, rich with timber and Thebe, below the peaks, and ruled Cilicia's people. So this is actually really sweet if you think about this. Like, he doesn't find his wife at home. like where you would expect a Greek wife to be. He finds her at the gates of the city watching for him. And so she comes down to meet him. She was worried about him. Okay, so his daughter, so this is, we're talking about Andromache's father. So Andromache's father's daughter had married Hector, helmed in bronze. She joined him now, and following in her steps, a servant holding the boy against her breast. In the first flush of life, only a baby, Hector's son, the darling of his eyes, and radiant as a star. Hector would always call the boy Scamandrius. Townsmen called him Astyanax, lord of the city, since Hector was the lone defense of Troy. So we meet this lovely little boy who's radiant as a star. It's very sweet. And they're both waiting on the gates to see their father and husband. Andromache is very worried. She was on the gates, the wall of the city, looking for him. She seems to see preemptively what's going to happen. She's addressing Hector here. She calls him Reckless One, my Hector, your own fiery courage will destroy you. Have you no pity for him, our helpless son, or me, and the destiny that weighs me down, your widow, now so soon? So note, she's calling herself a widow, even though she's talking to her husband who stands before her. But she sees the writing on the wall. She knows that Hector will probably die soon. Yes, soon they will kill you off, all the Achaean forces massed for assault, and then, bereft of you, better for me to sink beneath the earth. What other warmth, what comforts left for me once you have met your doom? Nothing but torment. I have lost my father. Mother's gone as well. Father, brilliant Achilles laid him low when he stormed Cilicia's city filled with people, Thebe with her towering gates. He, Achilles, killed Aetion. Not that he stripped his gear, he'd some respect at least, for he burned in his corpse in all the blazoned bronze. Okay, so we learned some stuff here. Andromache's worried that Hector will die because she's lost her whole family already. Her father's already dead because Achilles killed her father. So just like Achilles killed her father, she sort of suspects that Achilles will kill her husband. This is kind of an interesting part. There's some foreshadowing here. Achilles killed her father, but didn't strip his gear. So Achilles left her father in his armor. Kind of pay attention to that. You, Hector, you are my father now, my noble mother and brother too. And you are my husband, young and warm and strong. Please pity me. Take your stand on the rampart here before you orphan your son and make your wife a widow. So she sees in him her whole family. So this is a lot. If you were Hector, think of how you would feel. So this woman you love and and you love your son too, and she's begging you not to fight. Please don't die. You'll leave me alone. There's more to be said there, but Hector sees what she means, but he can't give her what she wants. All this weighs on my mind too, dear woman, but I would die of shame to face the men of Troy and the Trojan women trailing their long robes if I would shrink from battle now a coward. Nor does the spirit urge me on that way. I've learned it all too well, to stand up bravely, always to fight in the front ranks of Trojan soldiers, winning my father great glory for myself. For in my heart and soul I also know this well. The day will come when sacred Troy must die. Priam must die, and all his people with him, Priam who hurls the strong ash spear. So this is interesting too. Hector acknowledges what his wife says, and yet he cannot bring himself to run away. He knows everything is going to perish, not only his father, but the city too. The sacred Troy must die. He says the whole city must die. And yet he can't do that. It goes against everything he's learned. He needs to stand up bravely and to fight with his fellow soldiers and to try to win glory even if he dies. So this is his choice. He's got to choose Kleos if he's going to choose Nostos, but even if the Nostos is going to slip from his hands, he still wants the glory that comes from trying to save your city. And then he goes on. This is kind of interesting. So he's speaking to his wife here, talking about his grief for his city that he knows will fall. So even so, it is less the pain of the Trojans still to come that weighs me down, not even of Hecuba herself or King Priam, those are his parents, or the thought of my own brothers and all their numbers, all their gallant courage, may tumble in the dust crushed by enemies. All that is nothing besides your agony when some brazen Argive hails you off in tears, wrenching away your day of light and freedom. Then far off in the land of Argos he must live, laboring at a loom at another woman's beck and call, fetching water at some spring. Messias or Hyperia resisted all the way, the rough yoke of necessity at your neck. And a man may say who sees you streaming tears, there is the wife of Hector, the bravest fighter they could field, those stallion-breaking Trojans, long ago when the men fought for Troy. So he will say, and the fresh grief will swell your heart once more, widowed, robbed of the one man strong enough to fight off your day of slavery. So this is kind of interesting. Hector is envisioning the future of his wife when he is dead, and her future is a really miserable one. She'll be made a slave by the Argives, the Achaeans. And not only will that be humiliating, of course, being enslaved is horrible, but it'll be even worse for her because people will know that she used to be his wife, and he just couldn't protect her. So this is all very sad. It makes me really bummed out. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but anyway. Yeah, this is how Greek warfare works. If you capture a place, you basically are entitled to everything that place had, all of its riches, all of its people that you are then free to kill or enslave. And so even Andromache, this princess of Troy, will be enslaved. We also get to see Hector as a father. This is an image of a red figure column crater from, it's a little bit later than when Hector was writing, but it's referencing this scene from the Iliad. Hector here with Andromache and their baby. Okay, Hector as a dad. In the same breath, shining Hector reached down for his son, but the boy recoiled, cringing against his nurse's full breast, screaming out of the sight of his own father, terrified by the flashing bronze, the horsehair crest, and the great ridge of the helmet nodding, bristling terror, so it struck his eyes. And his loving father laughed. His mother laughed as well. And glorious Hector, quickly lifting the helmet from his head, set it down on the ground, fiery in the sunlight, and raising his son, he kissed him, tossed him in his arms, lifting a prayer to Zeus and the other deathless gods. Zeus, all you immortals, grant this boy, my son, may be like me, first in glory among the Trojans, strong and brave like me, and rule all Troy in power, and one day let them say, he is a better man than his father. When he comes home from battle bearing the bloody gear of the mortal enemy he has killed in war, a joy to his mother's heart. So, I love this little scene. We don't see a ton of babies, and especially baby humans in Greek literature, but here's one, this poor little baby who's afraid of his father when his father's wearing this war helmet. But the moment that his father takes the helmet from his head, then the kid sees his father again, recognizes his father, and Hector seems like a really good father. He's tossing the baby in his arms, saying a prayer to Zeus about the baby. And I have this line highlighted for you just to invite you to collate it with our other stories of Greek fatherhood. You might think of the Hesiod and Kronos eating his children, Ouranos stuffing his children back into his wife and mother. That's true. But here, Hector, he prays for his son to be better than his father. Hector wants his son to be a better person than he was. It's pretty unique. It's unique among the Greeks, and it's pretty lovely. It's a lovely sentiment. Homer is being very it's sort of cruel to us here, because this whole scene of father and son and wife is doomed. Troy will fall, Hector will die, and Astyanax will die too. He actually has a really horrible fate. In different versions, it's a different story, but in one of the versions, he's tossed from the walls of Troy to his death. So it's like this tiny baby being tossed from the city's walls. And then, just like they feared, Andromache will be made a slave to some Greek family. So that's what Book 6 is about. It's showing us this beautiful family scene, and Homer is basically letting us know that this is what everyone at Troy is fighting for, and this is everything that's going to be lost as well. So the best of the Trojans is here, and it's soon to be lost. Okay, so when we see Hector and his wife together, I think this gives us some kind of insight to something that's really important throughout the epic. There aren't a ton of female characters in this epic, but I think that they're really, really important. This kind of speaks back to your work on the women and relationships in the Gilgamesh Committee. Achilles has this moment in Book 9 when he is wondering why they're even fighting at all to begin with. Why are the Achaeans at Troy? Why must we battle Trojans, men of Argos? Why did he muster an army, lead us here, that son of Atreus? Why? Why in the world, if not for Helen and with her loose and lustrous hair? Are they the only men alive who love their wives, those sons of Atreus? Never. Any decent man, a man with sense, loves his own, cares for his own as deeply as I. I loved that woman with all my heart, though I won her like a trophy with my spear. But now that he's torn my honor from my hands, robbed me, lied to me, don't let him try me now. I know him too well. He'll never win me over. So we have Achilles in this moment in Book 9. He gives voice to a lot of different arguments, but this one I find very interesting. At the beginning of our discussion, I sort of invited you to think of Achilles and Agamemnon in a fight over war prizes, sex slaves. It seemed like they really didn't care much for women at all. They were just sort of prizes to fight over between men. But here, he's making some interesting claims. He says that he loved Briseis. I loved that woman with all my heart, though I won her like a trophy. You might think about this. Do you really think that Achilles loved Briseis, this war prize? I can see either way. I might make a discussion question about this. Do you really think Achilles is in love with Briseis? There's a Hollywood movie called Troy, that they made that's roughly based on the Iliad. And in that movie, Brad Pitt plays Achilles, and they do make him fall in love with Briseis. They make Briseis more of a complex character, and they do seem to be in love with each other. So there is that possibility. He might really love this woman, and then it really hurts him. My thought is that I think for Achilles, in some way, losing Briseis, losing his sex slave, who's just a trophy, I think it might not be that he actually loved her, but she might represent the sort of life he will never get to have if he chooses to stay at Troy and fight. She might be symbolic of the fact that he knows he might never have a wife, the kind of wife that he would love and cherish, like Hector cherishes Andromache, for example. Because he starts talking about the sons of Atreus. The whole war ostensibly is about how Helen, a wife, was stolen from Menelaus, the son of Atreus. Are the sons of Atreus the only men alive who love their wives? He's like, no, I want a wife, is kind of what I hear him saying here. But I'll ask you a question about this, because I think it's very debatable if Achilles is capable of the kind of love that we see Hector sharing with Andromache. Okay. But thinking about wives, I think it's really important to kind of end with this discussion here, the cause of the war. So, like I said at the beginning, in some ways, the whole myth is organized around how Helen basically caused the war, that by leaving her husband, she ignites this conflict between these armies and this 10-year conflict, whatever, trying to get Helen, whatever. So, there's more to be said there, though. There's kind of a backstory to that story. So this backstory also involves Achilles' mother, Thetis. So, in fact, let me show you Thetis back over here. Sorry, let's go back. Where are you, Thetis? There she is. Okay, so Thetis. So, let's visualize it here. So, Thetis is a really interesting goddess. Her fate as a goddess is really, really tied to Troy. So not only is she fated to be the mother of Achilles, the fighter who will bring Troy down, the best fighter in the Trojan War, but her marriage is really linked to Troy as well. So the thing about Thetis is, this is not stated in the epic. Homer does this a lot, where he references myths that everyone in his audience would know. But if we weren't raised Greek, we probably don't know this. But just here, I'm telling you the story now. Okay, so here's the thing with Thetis. So she was prophesied to have a son who was more powerful than his father. So this kind of Greek horror story, we saw this a lot in Hesiod, that these sons were fated to overmaster their fathers, and so the fathers are trying to strategize to keep that from happening. So Thetis is one of these women, kind of like Metis, Zeus's first wife. But so Thetis, she's supposed to have a kid who's going to be stronger than his father. So Zeus and his brother Poseidon come up with this idea that, listen, we cannot let Thetis have a baby with another divine figure. We can't let her marry a god and have a baby with a god. Because if she has a divine offspring, a divine son, then that son is going to topple this whole thing. Zeus will not be in power anymore, etc. So they basically conspire to force Thetis to marry a mortal man, so a human. And so this scene here, it's called the Judgment of Paris, which is what's depicted in this painting. The Judgment of Paris is something that happens during the wedding of Thetis to Peleus, Achilles' father. So Thetis, a mortal goddess, marrying this mortal man. At their wedding, this is kind of crazy, but anyway, everyone's invited. All the gods are invited to this wedding. A lot of humans are invited too. So here's Paris. He's the son of Priam, Prince of Troy. He's invited to the wedding. Everyone's invited except for the goddess named Strife. No one wants strife at a wedding, so they don't invite this, this, what do you call it? She's like the personification of discord and conflict, so they don't invite her. But then she's really mad about not getting invited, so she comes up with this like ruse. She's like, okay, here's a golden apple. Mercury, or Hermes, this is the god Hermes. Here's this golden apple. Give it to Paris. Tell him that he has to choose who to give the apple to. He has to choose the most beautiful of the goddesses. So, okay, all right, here's this apple. Here, Paris, choose who's the prettiest goddess. The goddesses in question are, here, this is Hera. You can tell because she's wearing purple. That's a symbol of royalty. Her kind of like avatar is a peacock. So Hera. This is Aphrodite. Her color is gray. She's got her armor down here. I'll let you see it better here. So this is her armor. And then in the middle, this is Aphrodite. Her color is red. She's also got Cupid hanging out with her. So like this is the iconography of these three goddesses. Paris is like, okay, so this is my judgment. I have to judge who's the prettiest. Okay, you guys all should get naked, of course, because that'll make it easier for me to judge. So that's why they're all naked. The women offer him things in return. They're like, hey, pick me. Athena says, if you pick me, I'll make you the best fighter. I'll make you the wisest person. Hera says, if you pick me, I'll make you the most powerful person. She's this queen goddess. Aphrodite says, pick me. If you pick me, I'll give you Helen of Troy. I'll give you Helen. I'll give you the most beautiful woman in the world. So Paris really likes Helen. He chooses Aphrodite. He gets Helen. So in some ways, this myth might actually be the real start of the conflict, that had not any of this happened, had not Zeus tried to marry Thetis off to a mortal, none of this would happen. Had not Aphrodite pledged to give a human being as a gift, that might not have caused the Trojan War. It's all very interesting. So in one of your reflection questions, I'm going to ask you, like, who do you think is really in charge of or at fault for the conflict? I think we could see like various people kind of having more fault than Helen herself does. But here we are. A couple things other to say is this Judgment of Paris is also the reason why some of these goddesses pick a side in the war. So Aphrodite is the only one who's really on the Trojan side, but it's because Paris picked her over the other two. And so Athena and Hera, they are champions for the Achaean side because they weren't picked in this situation. So, maybe it's these vain goddesses who are to blame for the conflict. Maybe it's Zeus. Maybe it's Hermes for doing this at all. No one said no at any point. But anyway, so there's a lot of people to blame, I think, and a lot of gods to blame too for the conflict at Troy. So it's kind of a fun thought experiment to think about who's really to blame. Okay, I think that's it, for today. We'll finish the Iliad next time.